Hi brothers and sisters, back for another video. I said that the next video I was going to make was going to be a look at that chapter, Psalm 119. And we know that it's, from what I've understood, it's supposed to be the middle chapter of the Bible. And of course it's the longest chapter of the Bible at 176 verses. So for now, all I'm going to just do is my cursory thoughts on it. I haven't really did an in-depth look at it. And I think to do so would probably take many videos to do it. So we'll get to it gradually, perhaps, or perhaps not, but we hope to. So for now, we're just going to make a few minor connections. Hopefully the video won't be overly long. And my sister had suggested I could show my bedroom to you. So I guess maybe I'll do that first. I wasn't gonna, but this is my bedroom. My curtains there look blue. They're real pretty blue, aren't they? And sometimes I wish they really were that color, but they're not. They're purple. I have purple curtains. Yeah. And usually the candle stands there is sitting over here, but I had to move it from my camera, from my computer. And then of course I have another set of purple curtains hanging here because I'm right against a window with my desk. And some nights I'll do studies here, just sit here and write some verses out, but most of the time I'm in my comfortable chair or sitting at the table or somewhere like that. So just thought I'd share. And I could leave it like that maybe. I don't know if that's a better picture for you to look at or care about. So these are some cursory thoughts, okay? So I wanted to look for some immediate connections that we could make and further verify our understanding about where we were to actually receive our laws from, all right? And we know, of course, that come from God, yes. So we're going to start in Psalm 110, and I do have it pulled up, but I'm not going to read it there. I'm going to read it right out of the Bible, which I didn't have opened yet because I wasn't 100% sure where I was going to start. So we'll go to Psalm 119, and we're just going to read a few verses and focus on them and see what connections we can make, because I think there's a lot of understanding to be had in this particular chapter. But until we can really get into it and dig into it, we'll just look at some cursory thoughts that I had looking at it today. So, because I ain't got my overhead light on, I've got this light here that I've got hooked to my computer. So, I'll use that. And it says, excuse me, it says, blessed are the undefiled in the way who walk in the law of the Lord. All right, so we're going to understand what the law of the Lord is, because the Bible clearly indicates what it is. Blessed are they that keep not his testimonies. I'm sorry, I'm going to say hers, because the law comes from her through her daughters. They want to make it he. They were to point at her law. That's right. We're going to look at that the further we go and understand it. So, blessed are they that keep her testimonies and that seek her with their whole heart. They also do no iniquity. They walk in her ways. All right. Thou hast commanded us to keep thy precepts diligently. Oh, that my ways were directed to keep thy statutes. Then shall I not be ashamed when I have respect unto all thy commandments. See, we get the word commandment here. We're going to look at that in a minute. I will praise thee with uprightness of heart when I shall have learned thy righteous judgments. And I will keep thy statutes. Oh, forsake me not utterly. So wherewithal shall a young man cleanse his ways? By taking heed thereto according to thy word. With my whole heart have I sought thee. O let me not wander from thy commandments. Okay, so we're going to stop there and we're going to look at a few things. And I would read to 31, but I know it's going to take so long to do that because I want to try to draw the connections pretty quick so that, you know, so many of us suffer from such a short attention span that I'm really trying to make the connections fast enough for the brain to follow along and go, hey, yeah, that's exactly what it's saying. So Psalm 119:10, I seek this with all my heart. Do not let me stray from your commandments. So the word for commandments here is 4687. Strong's Hebrew 4867. No, I said that wrong. 4687. I always do that. It's a feminine noun, commandment, command, commanded, obligations, prescribed, terms, things. It also says traditions. But she also says in Isaiah 29, she says, you approach me with the vain traditions of men. That's what she says. So, also, verse 19. All right, so we're just going to pick and choose for now. So I wanted to go to verse 19, and it says, I am a stranger in the earth. Hide not thy commandments from me. So who's the stranger in the earth? Well, we know that daughter Zion became the outcast that no man sought a covenant with. We also understood the meaning of the word or the name Zerubbabel, which you'll get, I believe it's Zechariah 3 or Zechariah 4. And it means stranger at Babylon or stranger in Babylon. A stranger is a foreigner. So if you look this word up here in verse 19, I am a stranger in the earth, it'll say a foreigner, an alien. Do I got that wrote down? Yeah. A sojourner, alien, foreigner, outcast is what I put in brackets. So we knew that name Zerubbabel actually meant a stranger at Babylon, or a foreigner in Babylon is where you would get a deeper understanding of who was in view. And that would be these daughters of Israel that held these commandments on their tongue with no guile that the first Adam rejected in covenant. So when we look at Babylon, we get this idea, and there's a term here we'll look at later if I can get things moving here. It means the eclipsing serpent, really, is what Babylon is, the eclipsing serpent. Now, we've got a system out there that in this, it's a generated sun, fake sun, whatever, that is actually eclipsing our real sun. And that's important to understand because the Shulamite says, look not upon me because I am black. Because the sun has looked upon me. My mother's sons were angry with me. They made me the keeper of the vineyard, but my own vineyard have I not kept. Now we come to understand what that meant. That's the false light shining on her, which is akin in our deeper understanding when we get searching through a variety of counselors, whether they be male or female, and we get a deeper understanding of really what's going on here. And so we get this huge planetary system out there, and it's eclipsing our real sun, is what it seems to be doing, right? And it does so link to Babylon, the eclipsing serpent. So Zerubbabel was 2216, and some will say it means begotten in Babylon. But I tend to go by the stranger at Babylon, or a foreigner in Babylon. Because of the character and the nature that Zechariah 3 or Zechariah 4 would have you understand about Zerubbabel or Zerubbabel. So why is it so important to understand who the commandments were, what the commandments were, and who you were to receive them from? Because if we don't get it right, we get it wrong. That's the opposite of getting things correct. So Psalm 119:31 really zeroes in on a very important detail, but because we've been taught a lie, we tend to bypass it and not pay no attention to this word. And it's a very important word. Watch. Psalm 119 verse 31. I cling. This is David, supposedly. Now, I suppose that it is the actual Spirit speaking here. All right? As an over the top of the physical, then you have the spiritual speaking. So Psalm 119:31 says, I cling, there's that word cling, to your testimonies, right? Yeah. Did I write the rest of that down? I cling to your testimonies. Let me look it up here. So 31. I have stuck. See, this was what interested me. They didn't want to put the word cling or cleave in there. I have stuck. I have cleaved unto thy testimonies, O Lord. Put me not to shame. Okay. So, I cling to your testimonies. I think I must have forgot to write the rest of it down, because I wanted to focus on two words in that verse. So the word cling here is 1692 is the word. And it means to cling, cleave, or to keep close. So Strong's Hebrew 1692, right? That's the word that's being used there. I cling, I cleave to your testimonies. Testimonies here is 5715, and it is a feminine noun. Testimony. Remember testimonies and where those come into view at the end of days, your witnesses. So 5715, feminine, testimony, ordinances, warnings, code of law, witness. That's what it means. So David says, I cleave to your testimonies, to your witnessings. And commandment, as we know, back here, 4687 was a feminine. All right? So he's cleaving to her commandments and her testimony in the earth. So what do we have in the earth? Well, we have a harlot spirit, don't we? Both in men and women. And we've examined that very thoroughly. Now, let's keep going. If we go to Deuteronomy 4:4, and I think if you're going to do a personal study on this for yourself, I think it would very much be helpful if you also included Deuteronomy 4 in with your study of Psalm 119, as well as Exodus 20. I do think them would be very helpful studies. Them three chapters kind of go together, in my opinion, at least at this point in time. So Deuteronomy 4:4. But ye that did, what's the word? Cleave unto the Lord your God are alive, every one of you this day. What's the word here? Let's pay attention. We're going to keep making these connections. So Psalm 119:31, I cling to your testimonies. Deuteronomy 4:4, but ye that did cleave unto the Lord your God are alive, every one of you this day. What's the word cleave? This one here is 1695, but it means a clinging and a cleaving. All right? So 1692 and 1695. So not a whole lot of difference. They're within the same word here. Deuteronomy 4:13 says this. And, not he, she, declared unto you her covenant, which she commanded you to perform, even what? 10 commandments. 10 commandments. That's found in Exodus 20, is where you'll find them. And she wrote them upon 2 tables of stone. Isn't that word cleave quite fascinating and interesting? And we know the covenant here she just stated was her 10 commandments. That's what she stated. So, where do we go in our thinking with that? If we're really trying to understand the commandments of God and who we were to listen to, who was to give them, and it was not at the mouth of men and 613 Torah laws with all of their appendages, and believe you me, the appendages that followed became very extensive. So we're going to go with that word cleave, and we're going to go to Genesis 2:24. What does it say? Therefore shall a man leave. This is important to understand too, because I was taught the opposite of this my whole life. Therefore shall a man leave his father and his mother, and shall cleave, oh, look at the word cleave, unto his wife, and her law, yeah, her commandments, her covenant, and they shall be one flesh. Yeah? So what's the word here for cleave? Again, 1692. To cling, cleave, to keep close. Now, my whole life, I was always told when a woman married a man, she was to go wherever he went. Yeah, that's what a good listening woman to her husband's laws and would do. She'd follow him. But you see, here it tells you the total opposite. He leaves his mother and father, and he cleaves to her, his wife. That's right. And you want to know why? If we think about it, it should be this way. Because the minute she leaves her family, she no longer has their protection. She doesn't. And she has no guarantee of really what kind of man that he might turn into and how his family is going to view her. Yeah. And so it puts her in a very precarious situation many times. And it has. We've gotten proof of that. Different women will say the minute I left where I was from, I became very much his victim. And so I believe this is an added protection to the covenant when it states it this way. Therefore shall a man leave his father and his mother and cleave to his wife. So she says over here, Deuteronomy 4:4, but ye that did cleave unto the Lord your God are alive, every one of you, this day. Yeah, cleave. And what does Job say to further validate that that is absolutely what we're looking at? Job 31:1. I made a covenant with mine eyes. Now, eyes in it of itself is telling you a lot here. But we're not going to look at that, but we have. I made a covenant with mine eyes. Why then should I think upon a maid? So he's actually saying his wife here. But we know the seven eyes of God is the Spirit of God in the earth, known as the presence of God. We know Abraham set out 7 ewes as witnesses to the well of water that Abimelech promised him that would be his and he would not touch because he hadn't realized a servant had removed it and said, no, it's not yours, it's my servant's. And Abimelech says to Abraham, I believe it's found Genesis 21, it's in there somewhere. And he sets out these 7 ewes. Now, we've understood it, really, it should have been translated as 7 she-goats for reasons that we've looked at and studied. And then Abimelech's confused, and he said, why did you set these 7 she-goats or lambs out? And Abraham says, to be a witness, a testimony. So it's linking you all to the witness in the earth, to the testimony of the Spirit in the earth. What does it say? It says the Spirit, the water, and the blood, right? Will testify. And it's really the Spirit bearing witness in the earth to these 2 covenants, in a sense, or to the blood. And we've looked at that again in Revelation. God says, fine, you want to be washed in blood, you want to drink blood, I'll give it to you. And but we see it. I made a covenant with mine eyes. Why then should I think upon a maid? For what portion of God is there from above? It's the Spirit. That's what Job is saying here. I'm cleaving to my wife, who was gave to me in covenant as the Spirit of God from above. God is there from above. And what inheritance of the Almighty from on high. So the inheritance actually links you back to the mother. These are her daughters, her scepter that she rules through. Job 30 verse 1, if you want to backtrack, this is the Spirit of Israel speaking again. She says, but now they that are younger than I have me in derision. They turned on her covenant in the land, whose fathers I would have disdained to have set with the dogs of my flock. You see, she's telling us, she's educating us what happened to her covenant. Yeah. And how is this further validated? Again, we've looked at this many times. Proverbs 5:15. Drink waters out of thine own cisterns, and running waters out of thine own well. Let thy fountains be dispersed abroad, and river of waters in the streets. Let them be only thine own, and not strangers with thee. Let thy fountain be blessed, and rejoice with the wife of thy youth. But they didn't. See, the wife of thy youth? Malachi 2. They dealt treacherously with the wife of their youth, with a wife in the spirit of their covenant. That's what we're told. And this here in Proverbs 5 with the water in the streets sounds a lot like Jerusalem in Ezekiel 47, I believe it is, described. And so, again, it gets further validated where you are to receive these laws from: your water, your wife. Song of Songs 4:12, a garden enclosed is my sister, my spouse, a spring shut up, a fountain sealed. Verse 15, a fountain, a garden's a well of living waters and streams flowing down from Lebanon. So that's your house in the forest of Lebanon. It's interesting that it's also flowing downward, as if this house in the forest of Lebanon was elevated in some way. Yeah. Isaiah 58, verse 11. We're just going to keep going, and as the thoughts hit me, we'll flow along with them. So, Isaiah 50:11. The Lord will always guide you, and she will satisfy you in a sun-scorched land. Well, how are you satisfied in a sun-scorched land? With water. Yeah. So the Lord here that is speaking appears to be very much the feminine form of the Lord. Yeah, that they will never tell you of that. So if you are to be satisfied with the water of your own wife, which we find in Proverbs 5, and you are to cleave to her and her commandments as unto the Lord, but ye that did cleave unto the Lord your God are alive, every one of you this day, then we know that this is the feminine over here when she says the Lord will always guide you. She will satisfy you in a sun-scorched land. And watch this. And strengthen your frame. She strengthens your frame, your body. We do not have an eternal body, do we? We have one that dies. So what's in view here? So she will satisfy you in a sun-scorched land and strengthen your frame. You will be like a well-watered garden and like a spring whose waters never fail. Oh, look at that. But you know, what's the opposite of strengthening your frame? Well, we find the opposite of that in Isaiah 59:6. Their webs shall not become garments, bodies, because they're the reason the land was dry and had no water to offer. They tore the spirit of her covenant down. They gnashed upon her to take the spirit of her covenant out of the land. Because to receive it from their own wife, according to the scripture, it was like a sour grape on the father's tongue. And those would be the fathers that she says, I would have disdained to have set with the dogs of my flock. Yeah. So their webs shall not become garments. We know garment is another word for your body. Neither shall they cover themselves with their works. That's the laws of sin. That's iniquity is shaped by the law. That is why their garment is of webs, cobwebs. It can't hold together. It's a web of lies shaped by the law. Iniquity is shaped by the law. So, iniquity is shaped by the law. Their works are the works of iniquity and the act of violence. That's blood. Violence is in their hands. God says, I asked no blood of you. All I ever asked of you was thanksgiving, to be thankful, and then if you want it, to freely give a thanksgiving offering unto me. Now, I think those thanksgiving offerings were absolutely important to give, because I think in this great kingdom that we once dwelt in, there were those who may have had more than others. And these offerings that were freely were gave by people who may have had it to give. And so when God asked you to give, usually God asked you to give the best that you had. Because if you're going to give it to somebody who needs it, then you want to give the best that you have. You do not want to give them something that's beat up or half rotten or torn or whatever the case may be. You want to give them the best. And God, being a God of fairness, would take these offerings from those who maybe had more and give them to those who had less in the kingdom, and thereby making all of us really equal in the kingdom. Now, that's my thoughts on it so far. I think it goes a lot deeper than that. But God says, I ask no blood of you. I never once put blood in my laws, ever. Those came from the rebellious people, Sodom and Gomorrah, right? And then that becomes Sodom and Egypt. And so we see the contamination of the woman's seed. And we were able to connect how that did so take place. And then a blood offering, a blood sacrifice came into play. So, but she says she will satisfy you in a sun-scorched land and strengthen your frame. Whereas over here, their webs shall not become garments, neither shall they cover themselves with their works. And their works are the works of iniquity, and the act of violence is in their hands. So we see the total opposite going on when we are receiving the truth of heaven, the laws of heaven, the commandments, which are 10 according to Deuteronomy 4. And so then we're took to Hosea 14 verse 5. I will be as the dew unto Israel. Israel shall grow as the lily and cast forth her roots as what? Lebanon. Yeah. So when man began to reject the spirit of his covenant, he no longer cleaved to her. And we saw that in the very beginning in Genesis. When Adam chose to set her apart and says, you're not a part of me, because he in essence did not want her to be the spirit of his covenant. So from there on, you see him building up the harlot, is what you see in the Bible playing out, which is why it becomes so thick, right? That's why it becomes so thick. And yet God says there's a little book sealed up in there for the end of days. So again, Genesis 2:24, therefore shall a man leave his father and his mother, and shall cleave unto his wife, and they shall be one flesh. But they weren't. He sets her out. He didn't want her in covenant. So when he did that, it leads to the abomination of desolation. She'll have no children. She's desolate. This woman, the spirit of the original covenant, the youth, the wife of his youth, became a desolate woman, a desolate spirit, because they begin to build up a harlot spirit that'll teach man as God. And so she has no children of her own. How can we validate that? Well, if we go to Isaiah 54 verse 1, it says, sing, O barren, thou that didst not bear, break forth into singing and cry aloud, thou that didst not travail with child, for more are the children of the desolate woman. Yeah, Galatians 4 coming into view here. Right? And cry aloud, thou that didst not travail with child, for more are the children of the desolate than the children of the married wife. Who was the married wife? Look the word up. It's Baal. And it's a masculine noun. And really all it means is he married a woman who would teach his religious lies and laws. And a covenant that did not come from God. It came from a God that God above says, your fathers had no fear of that God. Never did fear that God. Because that God had no power. It was a fake God. And so God says, you know, and where is the power of this great destroyer? Because God says, I rule all things. And we see the daughter of Zion mocking in, 2 Kings 19 or 1 Kings 19. And in Isaiah 37 is a repeat of that chapter. And she says, I planned this all a long time ago. So she says, and where is the fury? That's what she says of the oppressor. And she's saying, where is the fury of this great destroyer? I set this one up a long time ago. Yeah, this is only going the way I planned it to. That's all. And so here we see this desolate spirit. And why is she desolate? Because he married a wife who would teach a religious lie and law system that would build man up as God. And that's your image in Daniel 2. That these religions, these false religions of the world, gave life to, caused it to breathe, caused it to perform great miracles. Now, many are mad when I say that's the image of Christ. Well, what I mean by that, it's not the true Joshua that they're teaching us. They're teaching us Baal's idea. That's what they're teaching us. And so we're told that the only time that God was present, all of the signs that we were shown, you find them in, Isaiah 63 or 64? Yeah. Let's look at them. We've already done it, but for anybody who may be picking this up for the first time, what's the signs of the presence of God? And God tells us, you've never seen this sign since I was here, and you'll not see it again until I arrive, which is the true sign of the living God. So we go to Isaiah. I'm currently in Ezekiel. Okay. So Isaiah 60, what is it? It's 64. What does it say? Oh, that thou wouldest rend the heavens, that thou wouldest come down, that the mountains might flow down at thy presence. What does that sound like? Sounds like a volcanic eruption, doesn't it? And when the melting fire burneth, the fire causes the waters to boil. Definitely a volcanic eruption. To make thy name known to thine adversaries, that the nations may tremble at thy presence. So what does this take us back to? What is this reminiscent of? The Exodus, right? And what were the signs? When Moses was going in and brought these plagues in, they all had to do with a volcanic eruption. Pay attention. They got sores on them. He took the ash out of a furnace and he blew it in the wind. Well, that was symbolizing the ash of the volcano, really. All of those 10 plagues that took place in Egypt, I believe with the exception of one of them or whatever, had to do really with a volcanic eruption. And here we have this description again. And God telling us, you will not see this power again until I return. That's right. So, and as when the melting fire burneth, the fire causes the waters to boil, to make thy name, known to thine adversaries, that the nations may tremble at thy presence. When thou didst terrible things, which we looked not for, thou camest down, the mountains flowed down at thy presence. For since the beginning of the world, men have not heard, nor perceived by ear, neither has the eye seen, O God, beside thee, what she hath prepared for them that waiteth for her. So the eye has not seen the likes of this God, the only God, the living God, since this Exodus. That's what that says. And then you are shown all of the signs which are going on right now, because it is showing the presence coming back into existence, which, again, if you go through my videos, you'll understand how they have come back into existence, are coming back into existence, with no guile on their tongue, the spirit of Mother's Covenant, those 10 commandments, and then what she considers her Sabbath days. Okay, so we have a desolate spirit identified in Isaiah 54:1, we have the married wife identified in Isaiah 54:1. And the married wife is Baal, 1166. It's a masculine noun, but it has the idea of a woman teaching a man inside of a man. All right? She'll have no children, right? In a sense, she will be the desolate woman, in a sense. Though we have two women in allegory in Galatians 4. All right? So what does the desolate spirit here actually lead us to? It leads us to the term, the abomination of desolation. A man inside of a man shall have no children of her own. When he begins to teach his own religious lies and himself as God, she becomes a desolate spirit, which then takes you to the Shulamite in Song of Songs 1. She says, look not upon me. My mother's sons were angry with me. They made me the keeper of the vineyard, but my own vineyards have I not kept. That's the desolate spirit. That's what that is. And I suggested that it was Abishag. I'm not sure that I'm saying it right. And that was the little concubine that kept David warm when he was nearing death. And some says it is the Shulamite, and I speculate that it absolutely was the Shulamite. It was a Shulamite. It states that that's where she was from, and that she was a virgin, a little virgin maiden, and Solomon wanted her to wife. Now, it was stated that for the next one to be declared king, it was ideal for him to take the concubines of his father. Now, it's interesting that it's not the wife of his father, but the wife of his father would have been his mother, right? So they had to put something in there, so they stuck a concubine in there. But I'm speculating that there's more to this story than meets the eye, and they cut a lot of it out. But I'm saying that that Shulamite is this Abishag, and that name means a wandering father. Yeah, if our fathers didn't have a wandering eye, I don't know. It's all there. And again, the harlot says in Isaiah 47, no one sees me. I will never be widowless. I will never be childless. I will never be widowless. She says, no one sees me. Well, why does no one see her? Because she is the harlot spirit exalted in man's heart. And no one sees her. No one sees her because he's taught a religious lie. And the false foundation that fed out from Mount Zion was the contamination of a rebellious people, these sons who did not want her in covenant. And so it feeds out to the four corners of the world and becomes the false foundation of our law system, religious or otherwise. And if we go back far enough, we know that that's the founding of our government. It began in our religious ideas, and the two are so connected. So here we have this spirit of desolate, and yet more are the children of the desolate spirit than of she who had or has a husband. So that took us to the term the abomination of desolation. And what does the Antichrist do? All right? So that is this current Jesus, in my opinion, who is the Antichrist that Baal has built up under a false religious system and law system and gave life to that image to breathe. Daniel 2, you'll all bow down to this image as God and Lord and King. And so they give life to that image to actually breathe through a false religion that is built by men's hands. And in essence, make her a desolate spirit. No one will hearken to her spirit. Now you understand Joshua knew who he was. And he knew who he cleaved to. He did not cleave to a harlot. Know ye not, he that is joined to a harlot is a harlot. You're one. Yeah. And that's what the first Adam wanted, and that is what most men are wanting today. They want to cleave to the religious lie that Jesus is the only God they need. Joshua knew who his beloved was, and he cleaved unto this daughter and her commandments. And so they were one. They are one. And so, but they gave power to the image, the false religion. What's that? It's Judaism, Catholicism, and your main one, and I believe this becomes your horn, because Catholicism will link you back to the Nicene Council. And they had this huge debate, if you go in and you study the Nicene Council, whether Jesus was God or whether he was just a man. All right? And so what eventually won out was that Jesus is a God, the God, along with his Father. Right? And eventually a third male. So it all began from this idea of a one male, which links us back to actually what they were doing in Jeremiah 23, and we've looked at that in the last video. So it really does link us to the abomination of desolation. A man inside of a man will leave this spirit of the righteous woman absolutely desolate, which is actually the law or the commandments of Israel herself. That's right. And so the abomination of desolation, the day of the Lord, is about the controversy of Zion. And what was the controversy of Zion about? It was about the splitting of the pleasant land, Israel, into two covenants. One that would teach a religious line come under the bondage of that law, which, as we see, this world's founded upon that. Yoke upon yoke upon yoke on her neck. Versus the righteous woman in Galatians 4 that is equivalent to Sarah and also the mother spirit, Israel from above, who is the mother of us all. And she's the one that we haven't got yet. She's the one that is in view in Isaiah 29:4. I hear a familiar spirit as one who is speaking out of the dust of the earth. So the abomination of desolation, the day of the Lord, is about the controversy of Zion. How do we know that? Isaiah 34 verse 8. For it is the day of the Lord's vengeance and the year of recompenses for the controversy of Zion. So the day of the Lord is about the controversy of Zion, what you did to my pleasant land. And if you think a man who is actually the Antichrist is coming to rescue you before you've been dealt with and come to understand the full truth of what's going on, then you haven't gone in. You haven't got down on your knees and listened for the Holy One to speak to you. You haven't done that, and you don't care about it. You are so corrupted by the father corruption, and you're the worm feeding on that corruption, that lie. You will never transform, never. But yet it has the idea, in a sense, of that foot being so heavy on that worm that that worm is forced to change and understand things. Otherwise you will die. And so that's why God calls these daughters who are able to pick their head up and to heal from all the damage that these religious lies and laws has caused unto our spirit, unto our souls, unto our minds, unto our emotions. And it's the ones who can't pick their heads up that have been damaged the most. They're unable to pick their head up. They're unable to come away from a religious lie. They're too busy being sanctimonious because it makes them feel safe. Yeah. And there's no strength in that. It says, you have healed the hurt of the daughter of my people, slightly saying, peace, peace, when there is no peace. There is no peace under this religious lie. There is no peace under the teaching of this antichrist spirit. Because that is what current day religion teaches. Joshua knew his beloved. And he was so certain of those 10 commandments that he would not even fight to take a life. Right? Thou shalt not kill. Which leads us back to why David was not permitted to be the builder of the temple. Right? Now, I have issues with that too, because it stated that it would be Solomon. But Solomon clearly took that 666, pounds of gold, and I believe it come down from that melted statue in Daniel 2, and he made a temple, which is currently representing the male temple today, that's got the harlot spirit inside of him, which is really the Antichrist, the male inside of him, teaching himself as God. Right. Yeah. But Joshua is the new temple. Yeah, he is. Because he exalts her. He loved her. He was not joined to a harlot. And he willingly died to show you that. So, okay. So I wanted to also, I think I've done everything here. Yeah, pretty quick. All right. So I wanted to look at the word serpent right quick. It's 5175. And if you pull that word up and you go down to the number 3, it means a mythological fleeing serpent or of an eclipsing dragon. So that is so absolutely fascinating because of the 2 channels, and I'll leave their links underneath because of this dragon system that this man here is capturing pictures of it, I think almost more clearly than the Final Days channel is, and why I don't wholeheartedly embrace all their theology. I certainly can hearken to some of their counsel and understand certain things that'll deepen my own personal understanding of the word. So we know that this became, if you look 5175, what was that, Hebrew? I think it's the Hebrew word, yeah. It's going to tell you, it means it's symbolic of the world power. Yeah. That's why earth currently is known as Babylon. It is not known as Israel. Israel will be known in the day when when they begin to hearken to the spirit of her covenant, and we are promised that is going to take place. Now, there was one last thing I wanted to do. So I just find that that's interesting. So if you go and look into serpent or Rahab, the dragon, which was Egypt, it seems to constantly take you back to Egypt and to Sodom and Gomorrah, to the Sodom and Egypt in Revelation, the rebellious people who rejected the spirit of the original spirit of the covenant, which should have been the wife of his youth that you find in Malachi 2, who he dealt treacherously with. All right? So we've looked at all of those things, and we know this because they kept refusing the spirit of her covenant over and over again. And they'll say, well, only the children 18 and down was allowed to enter into Israel. So, no. But watch what God says in Ezekiel chapter 20. So we'll go there and we'll end on this. Ezekiel chapter 20. We'll start at, let me see, verse 16 maybe. Because they despised my judgments, and they walked not in my statutes. What were they? Deuteronomy 4, 10 Commandments. And walked not in my statutes, but polluted my Sabbaths. For their heart went after their idols. What were the idols? Well, we saw that idol in the Exodus, didn't we? And that idol came from Egypt. It followed them right out. And we've discussed how they changed the glory of Israel, which were the daughters, the mothers of wisdom, where they were to receive the spirit of their original covenant from. We saw them murdering them on the cornerstones. They are identified as your precious gemstones on the high priest's breastplate that actually protected them. And we saw them murdering them in Lamentations 4:1 when you go in and look at it. We see Mordecai teaching Esther his niece had to bow to a king, to a man, because he got very furious at Vashti because she wouldn't bow to him and play his harlot. To which you see him and 7 wicked counselors advising him to write a law that every woman in the land would bow to her Baal as basically Lord and Master when you get your deeper understanding. So we see it over and over again. Men just did not want to receive the spirit of the covenant at their wife's mouth. They refused it, they rejected it, and wrote their own. And then it states that Adam built himself up with thick clay. That has the idea he built himself up with power, with money, even physical power is there in the idea and your understanding. And he defamed and he debases her in the whole process so he can play God on earth. And to play God on earth means that you rule it. And you'll tell the other half what they'll do. Now, she ruled very differently. Her covenant was a very gentle covenant, and we see that explained or expressed through Joshua when he says, my yoke is light. He says it's not difficult to carry. It's a very light law system to have to carry and to follow. It's not hard to do. So, again, she says, you would not walk, but polluted my Sabbaths, for their heart went after their idols. Verse 17, nevertheless mine eye spared them from destroying them, neither did I make an end of them in the wilderness. So in their journeys during the Exodus. But I said unto their children in the wilderness, walk ye not in the statutes of your fathers. Right? They were writing the law themselves. They were taking it from their own wives, from their own mothers, and they were writing the law is what they were doing. And in the process, they were bringing on death, and they were actually weaving a body that could no longer give eternal life when they were doing this. They just didn't understand it. So, but I said unto their children in the wilderness, walk ye not in the statutes of your fathers, neither observe their judgments, nor defile yourselves with their idols. Yeah. I am the Lord your God. Walk in my statutes and keep my judgments and do them. And hallow my Sabbaths, and they shall be a sign between me and you, that ye may know that I am the Lord your God. Notwithstanding, this is important, the children rebelled against me. So it continued on down through the generations. They walked not in my statutes, they kept not my judgments to do them, which if a man do, he shall even live in them. They polluted my Sabbath, and then I said I would pour out my fury upon them to accomplish my anger against them in the wilderness. Nevertheless, I withdrew my hand. Right hand of God, the daughters. I withdrew my hand and wrought for my name's sake, that it should not be polluted in the sight of the heathen, in whose sight I brought them forth. I lifted up mine hand unto them also in the wilderness, that I would scatter them among the heathen and disperse them through the countries, because they had not executed my judgments, but had despised my statutes, and had polluted my Sabbaths, and their eyes were after their fathers' idols. That's why, where the witness dies, it's described in Revelation 13 as being Sodom and Egypt. That's why it's described in that manner. And it's telling you Egypt was a rebellious people. Israel became a rebellious people because they carried their religion out of the land of Egypt, and they went whoring after their women and that covenant that would build them up as gods on the earth, and they could gain riches and power and create war and make a whole lot of money off of that and make people sick and make more money off of that because, well, that's what the law system of God should look like, you know, absolute death. Yeah, which is what they brought on us. So they went after their fathers' idols. Wherefore I gave them also statutes that were not good, and judgments whereby they should not live. So she allowed them to have the wicked covenant. And then you also see her saying, fine, you'll be no burden to me, I won't deliver you. If you don't want to receive the spirit of the covenant at my daughter's mouth, I'm not going to make you. But there is only one thing left for you. And so when you blaspheme the Holy One and her laws, or the Holy Spirit, there is nothing left but to cut you away. That's all there is left. And so that provision is made under the law. It has to be. And so you can keep blaspheming the Holy One. You can keep blaspheming the Holy Spirit. You can keep saying that a man is going to come and rescue you and deliver the children. You can say that until the day you realize that it's not going to happen. And it's all there. You can cut out and you can continue to deal treacherously with the other half of your covenant, yet is she the wife of your youth and the wife of this covenant. And you will receive Israel, the daughter Israel's law, her 10 commandments. You're going to witness the entire system falling. You're going to witness a whole lot of people being cut away, I think, is the idea. Because there's nothing left to do but to try the people for the dear daughter of my people. She says, there's nothing left for me to do. They don't want your covenant. All I can do is see who is willing to walk in this covenant, to live this covenant, to understand what Joshua should look like, the Adam should look like, and to understand that my daughters cannot be behaving like a harlot and teaching him as God and hearkening to his religious lies and laws and allowing him to yoke her as his harlot, but to stand up for my truths. And in the day that you do this, I will strengthen your frame. You will have a new body. You will have water in a dry land. And it takes you almost to this idea that you find sort of when she says, you know, that water in a dry land and I'll strengthen your frame. It's almost got the idea of, it has the idea of that woman in Isaiah 42. And it almost has the idea of the spirit of earth. The mother spirit of earth being reborn through her daughters, but she promises her daughters, I'm going to protect you. So there's so much to be understood in that. It's really quite supernatural. And for those of us who are experiencing it in our lives, this very supernatural element of coming to an understanding of who we are individually, as one of these 144,000, and knowing what you can share, when you can share it, and what you do have to hold back. But at the same time, if you're going to deliver the children and be of any help to our Creator above, then we do have to speak some things that seems to be pretty uncomfortable to us at times. And try to whittle away down to what that little book is that is sealed up in there for us to find at the end of days and to deliver our children through it. And so I think that's good for now. I know there's some elements in there I missed. I always miss the elements that I really don't want to. But if I can think of them, once I rewatch this video, I'll write some of them under the video. I think I'm getting so I write less and less. And if I get into this again, studying it, there's other things I'd like to study. But I'm having more and more trouble making videos. I just don't, a lot of times I don't feel like it. I have a lot going on. Other things that I have to do, other responsibilities. Not that this is not the most important of them, because it definitely is. But if I can help my sisters understand things that maybe they don't, then that's a blessing on me. It's a great blessing. to help others and for them to help others. It's a blessing on me when I see, I call them the counselors. It says, by the advice of many counselors will you make your war. And that understanding is that her covenant, her bow, abode in strength. And she's able to smash the wicked bow, the wicked covenant that those archers in Genesis 49, 23, 24, Baal, your husband, shot at you to take those female scions, the daughters of Israel, and tried to destroy the spirit of their covenant. And yet she says, through the counsel of many will I make my war. And I think it's saying that when you hear this and you take a piece of this and you take a piece of this and you line it up with this passage, the little book's passage, because not all of these were ever intended to be included, then you're able to break Baal's covenant. You're able to smash that bow because she has sharpened you. She's made you strong. She's given your own arrows, because understand you have a bow, and yet it's made strong by the arm of the Almighty God. That's what it says in Joseph's blessings, and that's your divine female, your queen, who was gnashed upon to take the spirit of her covenant out of the land. So that's what I've got so far. Don't know if I'll get more, but if I do, I will definitely upload a video. I thank you all for watching my videos. I pray the Lord blesses you all with an abundance of truth, an abundance of that pure water that flows from Lebanon. I pray you are deeply blessed and cleansed by that, my dear sisters. I pray that the blood is washed off of the daughters, the filth and the blood. That's Isaiah 4:4 for anybody who wants to go look. So again, thanks for watching, and I hope you all have a really nice evening. Thanks.